The morning sun cast long shadows across Camp Pendleton as Sarah Martinez adjusted the pink grip tape on her rifle for what felt like the 100th time. The weapon looked completely out of place among the standard military equipment scattered across the armory table. Where other Marines carried standard-issue black or camouflage rifles, Sarah's M40A6 sniper rifle bore a distinctive rose-pink paint job that she had meticulously applied herself during her off-duty hours. "Look what Princess Barbie brought to the party," sneered Corporal Jake Morrison, his voice carrying across the preparation area loud enough for half the platoon to hear. Several Marines turned to look, their expressions ranging from amused to openly disapproving. Sarah kept her eyes focused on her equipment check, methodically inspecting each component of her rifle as if she hadn't heard the comment. The pink coloring wasn't a fashion statement or an act of rebellion. It was a tribute to her younger sister Emma, who had lost her battle with breast cancer just 6 months before Sarah enlisted. Emma had always loved the color pink, decorating her hospital room with pink flowers, wearing pink scarves to cover her hair loss, and maintaining her bright smile even during the darkest moments of her treatment. When Emma passed away at just 19 years old, Sarah made a promise at her graveside that she would carry her sister's memory into everything she did. "Martinez, what's with the Easter egg rifle?" called out Staff Sergeant David Chun as he approached her station. Unlike the mocking tone of Morrison, Chen's voice carried genuine curiosity rather than derision. He had been observing Sarah's performance during training for weeks and had noticed something that the other Marines seemed to miss. Her scores were consistently exceptional. Sarah looked up from her rifle, meeting Chen's gaze directly. "It's for my sister, Staff Sergeant. She died of cancer before I joined up. Pink was her favorite color." Her voice remained steady and professional, but those who looked closely could see the slight tightening around her eyes that spoke of carefully controlled emotion. Chun nodded slowly, his expression shifting to one of understanding. "I see. And how's your performance been with that particular weapon?" "Consistent, Staff Sergeant. I've maintained a 96% accuracy rating in training exercises." Sarah's response was matter-of-fact, but several nearby Marines exchanged glances. A 96% accuracy rating was exceptional, especially for someone barely 3 months out of basic training. Morrison, however, wasn't impressed. "Accuracy in training is one thing, Martinez. Real combat situations are completely different. That pretty little toy won't help you when the bullets start flying for real." His comment drew nods and murmurs of agreement from several other Marines who had yet to see Sarah in action outside of controlled training scenarios. The preparation continued around them as Marines checked and rechecked their equipment for the upcoming long-range shooting exercise. This particular drill was designed to test their abilities at extended distances, with targets placed at intervals from 800 meters out to an ambitious 6,000 meters. The 6,000-meter target was considered more of a theoretical challenge than a practical exercise. Very few Marines were expected to even attempt it, let alone succeed. Sarah completed her equipment check and moved to collect her ammunition. Each round had been specially selected and prepared for optimal performance at extreme distances. As she walked past groups of Marines, conversations seemed to quiet, replaced by barely concealed whispers and pointed looks at her distinctive rifle. "I heard she insisted on painting it herself," whispered Private First Class Tony Rodriguez to his buddy. "Command actually let her do it because her scores were so high they didn't want to mess with her routine." "Scores don't mean everything," replied Private Marcus Johnson. "Wait until she's in a real firefight. All that pink won't help when she's got hostiles breathing down her neck." The comments followed Sarah wherever she went, but she had learned to tune them out. The criticism wasn't new. She had faced similar reactions throughout her military training. Being one of only a handful of women in her unit was challenging enough, but carrying a weapon that stood out so dramatically from military norms made her an even bigger target for skepticism and mockery. As the Marines gathered for their briefing, Gunnery Sergeant Patricia Williams took her position at the front of the group. Williams was a respected veteran with multiple deployments and a reputation for straight talk. She had been observing the dynamics within the unit and was well aware of the ongoing situation with Sarah and her distinctive rifle. "Today's exercise will test your long-range capabilities under various conditions," Williams began, her voice carrying easily across the assembled Marines. "We'll be working with targets from 800 meters out to 6,000 meters. The extended range targets are optional, but I encourage anyone who feels confident in their abilities to attempt them." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the group before continuing. "I want to remind everyone that performance is what matters in this unit. I don't care if your rifle is pink, purple, or polka-dotted. If you can put rounds on target when it counts, that's all that matters to me and all that should matter to your fellow Marines." The message was clear, though not everyone in the group seemed to fully accept it. Sarah felt a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. William's support was encouraging, but it also meant that the pressure on her to perform was even greater than usual. Any failure on her part would be magnified by the attention her rifle attracted. Following the briefing, the Marines moved to the range in small groups. The shooting positions were spaced out across a wide area, with each Marine assigned to a specific station based on their experience level and the distances they intended to attempt. Sarah found herself assigned to one of the advanced positions, capable of engaging targets at all available distances. As she set up her equipment, Sarah could feel eyes on her from multiple directions. Some Marines were genuinely curious about her technique and equipment setup, while others seemed to be waiting for her to fail. The weight of their expectations and skepticism settled on her shoulders like a heavy pack. The pink rifle drew attention even from the range safety officers, who had to do double takes when they first saw it. However, when they checked Sarah's qualification records and training scores, their expressions shifted from surprise to professional respect. Her documented performance spoke for itself, regardless of her weapon's unconventional appearance. "Martinez, you're cleared for all distance targets," announced Range Safety Officer Lieutenant Mark Torres. "Take your time with setup, and remember your fundamentals. Wind conditions are variable today, so pay attention to your environmental readings." Sarah nodded and began her methodical preparation routine. She had developed this process during her training, incorporating techniques she had learned from her instructors along with personal refinements that worked best for her shooting style. Every movement was deliberate and practiced, from the positioning of her shooting mat to the precise adjustment of her rifle's bipod legs. The first target was at 800 meters, a challenging but manageable distance for most experienced Marines. Sarah settled into her shooting position, feeling the familiar comfort of her rifle's stock against her shoulder. The pink grip tape provided exactly the right texture for her grip preference, and the weapon's balance felt perfect in her hands. Through her scope, the target appeared clear and well-defined. She took her time reading the wind conditions, noting the movement of grass and flags at various points between her position and the target. The wind was moderate but consistent, requiring a slight adjustment to her aim point. Her breathing settled into the rhythm she had practiced countless times. Inhale, exhale halfway. Hold, squeeze the trigger steadily until the rifle fired. The shot broke cleanly, and through her scope, Sarah could see the impact point clearly marked on the target. Dead center. Around her, other Marines were engaging their own targets with varying degrees of success. The distinctive crack of her rifle seemed to draw extra attention, and she could hear comments from nearby positions. "Lucky shot," muttered Morrison from 2 positions over. He had just missed his own 800-meter target and was clearly frustrated with his performance. Sarah ignored the comment and prepared for her next shot. The 800-meter target required 3 rounds for qualification, and she intended to make each one count. Her second shot landed slightly high, but well within the scoring ring. The third shot was another center hit, earning her a perfect score at that distance. "Nice shooting, Martinez," called out Corporal Lisa Zhang from a nearby position. Zhang was one of the few other women in the unit and had been quietly supportive of Sarah since her arrival. That's some solid marksmanship. The acknowledgement felt good, but Sarah knew that the real test was still ahead. The longer distance targets would require everything she had learned about ballistics, environmental conditions, and mental focus. As she prepared to engage the 1,200-meter target, she took a moment to think about Emma. Her sister had faced challenges that made military training seem easy by comparison. Emma had endured months of chemotherapy, radiation treatments, and surgery while maintaining her positive attitude and encouraging everyone around her. When Emma told Sarah about her dream of joining the military herself someday, Sarah had promised to fulfill that dream for both of them. The pink rifle wasn't just a memorial. It was a reminder of strength, determination, and the promise Sarah had made. Every time she held the weapon, she felt connected to her sister's memory and inspired by her example of grace under pressure. At 1,200 meters, the target appeared much smaller through the scope, and the environmental factors became more critical to success. Sarah spent extra time reading the wind patterns and calculating her adjustments. The first shot felt good as it broke, but the impact was slightly left to center due to a wind shift she hadn't fully accounted for. She made a small adjustment and fired again. This shot was much closer to center, well within the acceptable scoring area. The third shot was her best yet at this distance, landing just inside the highest scoring ring. As Sarah completed the 1,200-meter stage, she noticed that several Marines had stopped their own shooting to observe her performance. Word was beginning to spread about the accuracy she was demonstrating, and even some of the earlier skeptics were starting to pay attention for reasons other than mockery. "She's actually pretty good with that thing," admitted Rodriguez to Johnson as they watched Sarah prepare for the 1,800-meter target. "I mean, I don't like the color, but she's definitely hitting what she aims at." Johnson remained unconvinced. "Long range is different, though. Wait until she tries those really distant targets. That's where you separate the real snipers from the pretenders." The 1,800-meter target pushed Sarah's equipment and skills to new levels. At this distance, factors like bullet drop and wind drift became much more significant. She had to account for the rotation of the Earth, variations in air density, and even the temperature of her ammunition. Her training had covered all these factors, but applying them in practice required intense concentration and precise calculations. Sarah took her time with each shot, treating every round as if it was the only one she would get. Her first attempt at 1,800 meters was slightly low, but still within the target area. She adjusted her elevation and tried again. The second shot was much better, landing close to the center ring. For her third shot, Sarah closed her eyes for a moment and thought about Emma's encouragement during her own difficult battles. She could almost hear her sister's voice telling her to stay confident and trust her training. When she opened her eyes and settled behind her rifle again, everything felt perfectly aligned. The shot broke smoothly, and through her scope, Sarah could see that it had landed dead center in the target. Around her, several Marines had gathered to watch, and she could hear murmurs of genuine appreciation for the shot. "Damn," whispered Morrison, his earlier mockery replaced by grudging respect. "She actually hit the center at 1,800 meters with that pink rifle." Staff Sergeant Chun had also been observing Sarah's performance and was quietly impressed with what he was seeing. Her technique was sound, her equipment handling was professional, and, most importantly, her results were consistently excellent. The color of her rifle was becoming less relevant as her marksmanship spoke for itself. As Sarah prepared to attempt the even longer distance targets, the attention from other Marines became more focused and less dismissive. Even those who had initially mocked her pink rifle were beginning to realize that they were watching something special unfold. The woman behind the distinctive weapon was demonstrating skills that commanded respect, regardless of personal opinions about military traditions or equipment appearance. The afternoon sun was climbing higher, and the heat was beginning to affect shooting conditions across the range. Sarah knew that the remaining targets would test every aspect of her training and equipment. But as she thought about Emma's memory and the promise she had made, she felt ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The 2,400-meter target marked Sarah's entry into truly elite shooting territory. At this distance, only the most experienced snipers typically attempted shots, and success rates dropped dramatically even among seasoned professionals. The target appeared as little more than a distant speck through her rifle scope, requiring maximum magnification and perfect environmental calculations. Sarah spent considerable time studying the terrain between her position and the target. She noted how the heat was beginning to create mirage effects that could distort her view and affect bullet trajectory. The wind patterns were becoming more complex as the day warmed, with different air currents at various altitudes between her muzzle and the target. "No way she makes this one," Morrison said quietly to the Marines who had gathered behind the shooting positions to observe. Despite his earlier show of grudging respect, he still couldn't fully accept that someone with such an unconventional rifle could consistently outperform more traditional shooters. "I don't know, man," replied Rodriguez. "She's been dead on at every distance so far. Maybe we should stop betting against her and start learning from her." Sarah was aware of the growing audience, but forced herself to block out everything except the task at hand. She had learned during her training that external pressure could be either motivating or destructive, depending on how she chose to process it. She decided to treat the attention as recognition of her skills rather than judgment of her methods. The ballistic calculations for 2,400 meters were complex. Sarah had to account for a bullet drop of several feet, significant wind drift potential, and the fact that her round would be in flight for nearly 3 seconds before reaching the target. During those 3 seconds, any change in environmental conditions could affect the shot's accuracy. She made her first attempt after careful preparation. The shot felt good when it broke, but the impact point was slightly right of center. Sarah studied the miss carefully, noting exactly where the bullet had struck and what factors might have caused the deviation. The wind had shifted slightly during her bullet's flight time, something she would need to predict better for her next attempt. Her second shot incorporated lessons learned from the first. She aimed slightly into the wind, anticipating the drift pattern she had observed. This shot landed much closer to center, well within the acceptable scoring area for this distance. The scattered applause from watching Marines confirmed that they understood the difficulty of what she had just accomplished. For her third attempt at 2,400 meters, Sarah took even more time with her preparation. She observed wind patterns for several minutes, noting the timing of shifts and gusts. She double-checked her ballistic calculations and made a small adjustment to her scope settings based on the changing light conditions. When she finally took the shot, everything aligned perfectly. The bullet's impact created a small dust cloud just left of dead center, an exceptional shot at this extreme distance. The spontaneous cheering from the Marines behind her positions confirmed that even the skeptics were beginning to acknowledge her abilities. "Holy shit," breathed Johnson, forgetting military protocol in his amazement. She actually nailed it at 2,400 meters. "I've seen experienced snipers miss that target completely." Staff Sergeant Chun had been quietly documenting Sarah's performance throughout the exercise. Her scores at each distance were among the best he had ever witnessed, especially for someone so new to the unit. He was beginning to realize that her unconventional rifle might actually be an advantage rather than a liability. The pink coloring made the weapon easily identifiable, but more importantly, Sarah's emotional connection to it seemed to enhance her focus and performance. Chen had seen other Marines who performed better with personalized equipment, but never to this degree. Sarah's shooting was reaching levels that suggested natural talent, combined with exceptional training and mental preparation. As Sarah prepared for the 3,600-meter target, the crowd of observing Marines had grown substantially. Word was spreading across the range that something unusual was happening at her shooting position. Even Marines who had completed their own shooting requirements were staying to watch her attempt the longer distance targets. The 3,600-meter shot represented a significant step up in difficulty. At this distance, environmental factors became so critical that even tiny miscalculations could result in complete misses. The target appeared as barely more than a dot through her scope, requiring perfect clarity and unwavering focus to engage effectively. Sarah's preparation routine became even more methodical at this distance. She spent nearly 10 minutes studying wind patterns, using a handheld weather meter to record detailed environmental data. She consulted ballistic charts and made multiple calculations to ensure her scope adjustments were precisely correct. Gunnery Sergeant Williams had arrived at the range during Sarah's 2,400-meter shooting and had been quietly observing her technique. As a veteran sniper instructor, Williams recognized excellence when she saw it. Sarah's methodical approach, combined with her obvious natural ability, reminded Williams of the best students she had trained over the years. "Her fundamentals are textbook perfect," Williams commented quietly to Chun as they watched Sarah's preparation. "Look at her breathing control, her body position, the way she interfaces with her weapon. That's not luck, that's serious training and natural talent." Chun nodded in agreement. "Her scores have been consistently exceptional since she joined the unit. I was initially concerned about the rifle modification, but her performance speaks for itself." "Sometimes unconventional approaches work," Williams replied. "If that pink rifle helps her maintain focus and emotional connection to her shooting, then it's serving its purpose. Results matter more than appearances." Sarah's first attempt at 3,600 meters was a challenging shot that tested every aspect of her skills. She had to estimate wind conditions across nearly 2.5 miles of terrain, account for significant bullet drop, and maintained perfect form during a trigger squeeze that had to be timed precisely. The shot felt good, but the impact was low and left of her aim point. She studied the miss carefully, noting the environmental conditions at the time of shot and how they might have differed from her predictions. The bullet's flight time at this distance was over 4 seconds, providing ample opportunity for changing conditions to affect trajectory. Her second attempt incorporated corrections based on her first shot's performance. She adjusted her aim point and modified her wind calculation slightly. This shot landed closer to center, but was still outside the highest scoring area. However, hitting the target at all at 3,600 meters was an achievement that most Marines never accomplished. For her final attempt at this distance, Sarah took even more time with her mental preparation. She thought about Emma's determination during her cancer treatments, how her sister had never given up even when facing impossible odds. That same determination and refusal to quit had driven Sarah through the most challenging aspects of her military training. The shot broke cleanly, and through her scope, Sarah watched the bullet's impact create a small dust signature very close to the target center. The cheering from the Marines behind her was much louder this time, reflecting their growing appreciation for the exceptional marksmanship they were witnessing. "I can't believe what I'm seeing," admitted Morrison, his earlier skepticism completely replaced by genuine admiration. "She's hitting targets that I wouldn't even attempt. That pink rifle is starting to look pretty impressive." As word spread about Sarah's performance, Marines from other parts of the range began arriving to observe her shooting. The 4,800-meter target was next, representing a distance that only elite military snipers typically attempted. Success at this range required not only exceptional marksmanship skills, but also advanced understanding of ballistics and environmental factors. Lieutenant Torres, the range safety officer, approached Sarah's position as she prepared for the 4,800-meter attempt. "Martinez, you're drawing quite an audience," he observed with a smile. "Your performance today has been exceptional. The 4,800-meter target is optional, and there's no shame in stopping here." Sarah looked up from her equipment preparation. "Thank you, sir, but I'd like to attempt the longer distances if possible. My equipment and training should be sufficient for these ranges." Torres nodded approvingly. "Very well. Take your time with setup, and remember that safety protocols are even more critical at these extended ranges. Your backstop area is clear, but be extra careful with your environmental calculations." The preparation for 4,800 meters required Sarah to push her equipment and skills to their absolute limits. Her rifle scope was at maximum magnification, making even tiny movements appear exaggerated. Environmental factors that were minor considerations at shorter ranges became critical variables that could determine success or failure. Sarah spent nearly 15 minutes preparing for her first shot at this distance. She used binoculars to study the terrain between her position and the target, noting landmarks that could help her judge wind patterns. She recorded detailed environmental data and consulted multiple ballistic references to ensure her calculations were as accurate as possible. The mathematical complexity of the 4,800-meter shot was substantial. Bullet drop at this distance measured in tens of feet, requiring significant elevation adjustments. Wind drift could move the bullet several feet left or right, depending on conditions. Even the Coriolis effect, the rotation of the Earth, became a factor that had to be considered in her calculations. When Sarah finally took her first shot at 4,800 meters, the rifle's report seemed to echo longer across the range. The bullet's flight time was over 5 seconds, during which environmental conditions could change significantly. Through her scope, she watched for the impact signature, which appeared as a small dust cloud well short of the target. The miss wasn't unexpected at this extreme distance, but Sarah studied it carefully to understand what factors had contributed to the bullet falling short. Her elevation calculation had been conservative, and the actual bullet drop was greater than her initial estimate. She made corrections and prepared for her second attempt. Her second shot at 4,800 meters incorporated lessons learned from the first. She increased her elevation adjustment significantly and modified her wind calculations based on observed conditions during her first bullet's flight. This shot landed much closer to the target, though still short of the center area. The fact that Sarah was even hitting the target area at 4,800 meters was remarkable enough to draw professional admiration from the experienced Marines observing her shooting. Many of them had never seen anyone attempt such extreme distance shots, let alone achieve consistent target impacts. She's in territory that most of us never even consider, commented Zhang to the group of Marines watching from behind the shooting line. This is sniper school instructor level shooting, and she's doing it with a rifle that half of us made fun of this morning. For her third attempt at 4,800 meters, Sarah incorporated all the environmental data she had gathered from her previous two shots. She made fine adjustments to both elevation and windage based on her observations of actual bullet performance at this distance. Her mental preparation included visualization techniques she had learned during training, mentally rehearsing the perfect shot sequence. When the shot broke, Sarah felt that everything had aligned correctly. The bullet's impact created a dust signature much closer to the target center than her previous attempts. While not a perfect center hit, it was well within the scoring area and represented exceptional marksmanship at this extreme distance. The applause from the watching Marines was sustained and enthusiastic. They were witnessing something that most of them would never see again, a relatively new Marine demonstrating world-class shooting abilities with an unconventional rifle that had initially drawn nothing but mockery and skepticism. As Sarah began preparing for the ultimate challenge, the 6,000-meter target, the atmosphere around her shooting position had completely transformed. The pink rifle that had been a source of ridicule that morning was now viewed with respect and curiosity. Marines who had dismissed her as a novelty were now studying her technique and asking serious questions about her training methods. The 6,000-meter target represented the absolute limit of what was considered possible with standard military rifles and ammunition. Very few Marines had ever successfully engaged targets at this distance, and those who had were considered elite snipers with years of specialized training and experience. For Sarah to attempt this shot after only months in the Marines was unprecedented. As she prepared for what would be the ultimate test of her abilities and her pink rifle's capabilities, Sarah thought once again about Emma's courage in facing impossible odds. Her sister had never backed down from a challenge, no matter how difficult or unlikely success might be. That same spirit had driven Sarah to this moment, where she would either validate everything she had worked for or face the kind of failure that could define her military career. The 6,000-meter target sat at the very edge of what was visible through Sarah's rifle scope, even at maximum magnification. At this extreme distance, the target appeared as little more than a faint smudge against the hillside backdrop, requiring perfect atmospheric conditions and exceptional equipment performance to engage successfully. The mathematical complexity of the shot was staggering. Bullet drop measured in dozens of feet, flight time exceeded 6 seconds, and environmental variables could affect trajectory in ways that were difficult to predict accurately. Word of Sarah's exceptional performance at the previous distances had spread throughout Camp Pendleton. Marines from other units had begun arriving at the range, drawn by reports of someone attempting the legendary 6,000-meter shot with an unconventional pink rifle. The crowd behind the shooting line now included officers, senior enlisted personnel, and even some visiting instructors from the Scout Sniper School. Major Robert Harrison, the base's senior marksmanship instructor, had driven over specifically to observe Sarah's attempt at the 6,000-meter target. As a former Marine sniper with multiple combat deployments, Harrison had seen the world's best military marksman in action. He was skeptical that anyone, especially a relatively new Marine, could successfully engage targets at such extreme distances. I've seen maybe 5 Marines in my entire career who could consistently hit targets at 6,000 meters, Harrison commented quietly to Gunnery Sergeant Williams. And they all had years of specialized training and custom-built rifles. This is either going to be remarkable or a very public lesson in the limits of standard equipment. Williams nodded thoughtfully. Martinez has been exceptional at every distance so far. Her technique is flawless, and that rifle seems to shoot better than it should. I'm not ready to bet against her yet. Sarah was acutely aware of the growing attention, but forced herself to focus entirely on the technical challenges ahead. The 6,000-meter shot would require everything she had learned about ballistics, combined with environmental reading skills that typically took years to develop. She would have only 3 rounds to demonstrate whether her training, equipment, and natural abilities were sufficient for this ultimate test. The environmental conditions that afternoon presented both challenges and opportunities. The air was clear with excellent visibility, but wind patterns were complex due to heating effects from the desert terrain. Sarah spent nearly 30 minutes studying these patterns, using binoculars to observe grass movement dust drifts, and mirage effects at various points along the bullet's projected path. Her ballistic calculations for 6,000 meters filled an entire page of her shooting data book. Bullet drop at this distance was over 60 feet, requiring her to aim well above the actual target. Wind drift calculations had to account for different air currents at various altitudes, as her bullet would arc high above the intervening terrain before descending toward the target. The mathematical precision required was extraordinary. A calculation error of just a few minutes of angle could result in a miss by dozens of feet. Sarah double and triple-checked every number, consulting multiple ballistic references and using her handheld calculator to verify complex computations. As she worked through her preparations, Sarah became aware of conversations taking place among the observing Marines. The tone had shifted completely from the morning's mockery to genuine anticipation and respect. Even Morrison, who had been her most vocal critic, was now explaining to newcomers how impressive her previous shots had been. "She's hit everything she's aimed at so far," Morrison was telling a group of Marines who had just arrived. "I mean, I thought that pink rifle was a joke this morning, but she's been shooting like a machine all day. If anyone can make this 6,000-meter shot, it might actually be her." The technical challenges of extreme long-range shooting went far beyond simple marksmanship. At 6,000 meters, factors like air density, temperature variations, and even the Coriolis effect became significant variables. Sarah had to calculate how the Earth's rotation would affect her bullet's path over the 6+ seconds of flight time. Her rifle, despite its unconventional appearance, was mechanically sound and properly zeroed. The pink paint job had no effect on the weapon's accuracy, and Sarah's meticulous maintenance routine ensured that every component was functioning optimally. Her ammunition had been hand-selected for consistency, with each round inspected for weight variations and other factors that could affect long-range performance. As Sarah finalized her calculations and scope adjustments, Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Myers arrived at the range. Myers was the commanding officer of the base's advanced marksmanship programs and had heard radio reports about an exceptional shooting performance taking place at the long-range facility. She was particularly interested when she learned that the shooter was using a non-standard colored rifle. "What's the story on this Marine?" Myers asked Major Harrison as she observed Sarah's methodical preparation routine. "Martinez, Sarah. She's been in country about 3 months. Came through basic with exceptional scores. The pink rifle is apparently a memorial to her sister who died of cancer. Her performance today has been extraordinary. She successfully engaged targets out to 4,800 meters with remarkable accuracy." Myers studied Sarah through binoculars, noting her professional demeanor and systematic approach to the extreme distance shot. "Her technique looks solid. What do you think her chances are at 6,000? Harrison shook his head slowly. "Honestly, ma'am, I'd say less than 10%. The 6K target is more of a theoretical exercise than a practical shooting challenge. Weather conditions would have to be perfect, her calculations would have to be flawless, and she'd need a significant amount of luck on top of exceptional skill." As if responding to their conversation, Sarah completed her final equipment checks and settled into her shooting position. The crowd behind the line grew quiet, sensing that they were about to witness something extraordinary, whether successful or not. The pink rifle that had drawn so much attention and criticism was now the focus of intense anticipation. Sarah's shooting position was textbook perfect. Her body alignment, rifle support, and scope picture all demonstrated the fundamentals she had mastered during training. However, at 6,000 meters, even perfect technique was barely sufficient for success. Environmental factors beyond her control would play a massive role in determining the shot's outcome. Her breathing routine settled into the slow, controlled pattern she had practiced thousands of times. At this distance, even slight body movement could affect the shot's precision. Sarah had to time her trigger squeeze, not only with her natural respiratory pause, but also with observed wind patterns that could change during her bullet's extended flight time. The first shot at 6,000 meters represented the culmination of everything Sarah had learned about precision shooting. Her ballistic calculations were as accurate as possible, her environmental reading was based on careful observation, and her rifle was performing flawlessly. When the shot broke, it felt perfect, smooth trigger pull, proper follow-through, and no apparent disturbances to her position. The bullet's flight time at 6,000 meters was just over 6 seconds, during which Sarah maintained her shooting position and watched through her scope for the impact signature. The range fell completely silent as Marines strained to see any indication of where the bullet had struck. Through her scope, Sarah saw a small dust cloud appear near the target area. The impact was visible, but difficult to locate precisely due to the extreme distance and atmospheric conditions. Range personnel with high-powered spotting scopes were better positioned to determine the exact impact point. Miss, low, and left called out the spotter through his radio. Approximately 50 meters short and 30 meters left of target center. The miss wasn't unexpected, but it provided valuable data for Sarah's second attempt. The bullet had fallen short despite her calculations, indicating that either her ballistic data was conservative or environmental conditions were causing more drag than anticipated. The leftward drift suggested wind patterns that weren't fully accounted for in her initial calculations. Despite the miss, the fact that Sarah's shot had landed in the general target area at 6,000 meters was remarkable enough to draw appreciative comments from the observing Marines. Most attempts at this distance resulted in complete misses, with no visible impact signature anywhere near the intended target. Sarah studied her data book carefully, comparing her calculations with the actual impact point. She made adjustments to both elevation and windage, increasing her aiming point to compensate for the additional bullet drop she had observed. Her wind calculations were modified based on the drift pattern shown by her first shot. "She's making good adjustments," commented Major Harrison to Lieutenant Colonel Myers. "Using the first shot as a ranging round is smart tactics at this distance. Her corrections look reasonable based on what I saw." For her second attempt, Sarah incorporated lessons learned from her first shot while maintaining confidence in her fundamental technique. The environmental conditions appeared stable, but at 6,000 meters, even minor changes could significantly affect bullet trajectory. She spent additional time studying wind indicators before committing to the shot. Her second shot at 6,000 meters felt even better than the first. The trigger broke cleanly, her follow-through was perfect, and she maintained her shooting position throughout the bullet's flight. Again, the range fell silent as everyone waited to see the impact results. "Hit," announced the spotter after several seconds of scanning. "Impact approximately 20 meters short and 10 meters right of center." The second shot had landed much closer to the target, confirming that Sarah's adjustments were moving her impacts in the right direction. The fact that she was now consistently hitting within the general target area at 6,000 meters was an achievement that most Marines would never accomplish in their entire careers. The crowd of observers was growing increasingly excited as they realized they might be witnessing military history in the making. Sarah's performance was already exceptional, but a successful hit on the 6,000-meter target would represent something truly extraordinary. For her final attempt at 6,000 meters, Sarah made fine adjustments based on both of her previous shots. The pattern of impacts suggested that her ballistic calculations were very close to correct, requiring only minor modifications to achieve a direct hit. Her confidence was building with each shot as her rifle and ammunition were performing consistently. Sarah's mental preparation for the final shot included visualization techniques she had learned during her training. She imagined the perfect shot sequence from her breathing routine through trigger squeeze and follow-through. Most importantly, she thought about Emma's memory and the promise she had made to honor her sister through excellence in everything she did. The pink rifle that had been mocked and criticized that morning now represented something much more significant. It was a symbol of determination, skill, and the refusal to be limited by other people's expectations. Sarah's performance had already proven that unconventional approaches could achieve remarkable results when combined with proper training and natural talent. As she settled behind her rifle for the final 6,000-meter attempt, Sarah felt a sense of calm confidence that surprised her. The technical challenges were enormous, the pressure was intense, and failure would be very public. However, her preparation was complete, her equipment was performing perfectly, and her mental state was focused and determined. The crowd behind the shooting line had grown to include nearly 100 Marines and several dozen civilian range personnel. Word had spread throughout the base that something extraordinary was happening at the long-range facility. Even personnel who had never shown interest in marksmanship were drawn by reports of someone attempting the legendary 6,000-meter shot. Sarah's final preparation routine was even more meticulous than her previous attempts. She verified every calculation one more time, double-checked her scope settings, and spent extra time reading environmental conditions. The wind patterns appeared stable, visibility was excellent, and her equipment was functioning flawlessly. When she finally aligned her crosshairs for the third and final shot at 6,000 meters, everything felt perfectly coordinated. Her breathing was controlled, her trigger finger was positioned correctly, and her mental focus was absolute. This shot would determine whether her morning of exceptional shooting would conclude with triumph or disappointment. The moment had arrived for Sarah to discover whether months of training, natural talent, and an unconventional pink rifle could combine to achieve something that most Marines considered impossible. Sarah's breathing settled into the familiar rhythm that had become second nature through thousands of repetitions in training. Inhale, exhale halfway, hold, and during that natural respiratory pause, apply steady pressure to the trigger. At 6,000 meters, this routine became even more critical, as any movement or inconsistency could send her bullet dozens of feet off target. The crosshairs in her scope were aligned precisely according to her calculations, positioned high above the actual target to account for the massive bullet drop, and offset slightly to compensate for wind drift. Through the scope, the target was barely visible as a tiny square against the distant hillside. Sarah had to trust her mathematics and preparation completely, as there was no way to visually verify her aim point at this extreme distance. As her finger applied the final ounces of pressure to the trigger, Sarah thought briefly about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, she had been grieving her sister's death and struggling to find direction in her life. Emma's memory had guided her to the Marines, and Emma's favorite color had transformed her rifle into something that connected her to that inspiration every time she held it. The rifle fired with its characteristic sharp crack, and the pink-colored weapon recoiled against Sarah's shoulder exactly as it had thousands of times before. The bullet began its 6-second journey across nearly 4 miles of desert terrain, following a high arc that would carry it hundreds of feet above the intervening ground before descending toward its target. Sarah maintained her shooting position perfectly, keeping her eye to the scope and her rifle steady as she watched for the impact signature. The discipline to follow through completely was essential at this distance, where any movement could affect the final moments of bullet flight. Around her, the entire range had fallen completely silent as nearly 200 Marines and civilians waited to see the result. Lieutenant Colonel Myers found herself holding her breath as she watched through her binoculars. In her 20-year military career, she had never seen anyone attempt a 6,000-meter shot, let alone someone with Sarah's limited experience. The mathematical complexity alone was staggering, but the precision required for success was almost beyond comprehension. Major Harrison was tracking the seconds in his head, counting down the estimated flight time. At 6 seconds, he expected to see some indication of impact, whether successful or not. His experience told him that the odds were heavily against success, but Sarah's performance throughout the day had been so exceptional that he found himself genuinely hoping she would make history. The spotter with the high-powered spotting scope was scanning the target area intently, ready to call the impact location as soon as it became visible. His equipment provided much better target resolution than Sarah's rifle scope, making him the definitive judge of shot placement. The entire range waited for his assessment. "Stand by," the spotter called out, his voice carrying clearly across the silent range. He was still scanning the target area, looking for the telltale dust cloud that would indicate bullet impact. At 6,000 meters, even a direct hit might be difficult to spot immediately due to atmospheric conditions and the tiny scale of the target. Sarah remained frozen in her shooting position, her eyes still pressed to her scope despite knowing that she couldn't see the target area clearly enough to judge impact herself. Her heart was pounding, but her rifle remained rock steady. Everything she had worked for, everything she had promised Emma, was riding on this single shot. Suddenly, the spotter's voice cut through the tension. "Impact. Stand by for assessment." The crowd stirred but remained quiet, waiting for the critical information about shot placement. An impact at 6,000 meters was remarkable in itself, but the location would determine whether Sarah had achieved something merely impressive or truly extraordinary. "Confirm hit," the spotter announced, his voice now carrying clear excitement. "Target center, high by approximately 2 feet. Scoring hit at 6,000 meters." The range erupted in cheers and applause that could be heard for miles across Camp Pendleton. Marines were jumping up and down, shaking hands, and pointing at Sarah's position in amazement. Even the most experienced snipers in the crowd were visibly stunned by what they had just witnessed. Sarah finally lifted her head from her rifle scope, hardly able to believe what she was hearing. A successful hit at 6,000 meters was something she had dreamed about, but never quite believed was possible. The pink rifle that had drawn so much mockery and criticism had just delivered the shot of her lifetime. Morrison was one of the first to reach Sarah's position, his face showing a mixture of amazement and genuine admiration. "Martinez, that was the most incredible thing I've ever seen on a rifle range," he said, extending his hand for a congratulatory handshake. "I owe you a serious apology for this morning. That pink rifle just made military history." The crowd of Marines surrounding Sarah was growing by the second as word spread about the successful 6,000-meter shot. Phones were coming out to record the celebration, and Sarah found herself being interviewed by Marines who wanted to document the achievement for posterity. Gunnery Sergeant Williams pushed through the crowd to reach Sarah's position. As a veteran instructor, Williams understood better than most what had just been accomplished. "Marine, what you just did will be talked about for years. That's the kind of shooting that separates legends from everyone else." Major Harrison and Lieutenant Colonel Myers approached together, both wearing expressions of professional amazement. Harrison had witnessed exceptional marksmanship throughout his career, but never anything quite like this. Myers was already thinking about the implications for training programs and recruitment. "Martinez," Lieutenant Colonel Myers began, "I need to understand exactly what training you've received and how you develop these capabilities. What you've demonstrated today suggests skills that we typically see only in our most advanced sniper programs." Sarah stood at attention as she addressed the senior officers, still somewhat overwhelmed by the attention and celebration around her. "Ma'am, I completed standard basic marksmanship training and have been practicing extensively during off-duty hours. My sister Emma died of cancer before I enlisted, and I promised her I would excel at everything I attempted in the military." The emotional context behind Sarah's motivation added another layer to an already remarkable story. The pink rifle wasn't just an unconventional choice. It was a deeply personal connection to the inspiration that had driven her to achieve something extraordinary. "The paint job," Myers continued, "was that specifically chosen to honor your sister?" "Yes, ma'am. Pink was Emma's favorite color, especially during her cancer treatment. She always said it represented hope and strength. I wanted to carry that with me in everything I did as a Marine." The crowd of observers was beginning to disperse, but many Marines remained to examine Sarah's rifle and equipment. The weapon that had been mocked and ridiculed that morning was now being studied with genuine professional interest. Several senior snipers were asking detailed questions about her modifications and maintenance routines. Staff Sergeant Chun had been documenting Sarah's performance throughout the day, and her final achievement had confirmed his assessment that she possessed truly exceptional abilities. "Martinez, I'm recommending you for advanced marksmanship training immediately. Skills like yours need to be developed through specialized programs." The recommendation for advanced training was exactly what Sarah had hoped to achieve, but through her performance rather than special consideration. Her success at 6,000 meters had opened doors that typically required years of service to access. The pink rifle had become a symbol of achievement rather than a source of criticism. As the initial excitement began to subside, Sarah started breaking down her equipment and preparing to leave the range. The 6,000-meter shot had been the culmination of an extraordinary day, but she knew that this achievement was just the beginning of her military career rather than its pinnacle. Range personnel were already making plans to document the 6,000-meter hit for official records. Successful shots at this distance were rare enough to warrant formal recognition, and Sarah's achievement would likely be studied by marksmanship instructors for years to come. Private Rodriguez approached Sarah as she packed her equipment. "Martinez, I wanted to apologize for some of the things guys said about your rifle this morning. We were wrong, and what you did today proves that results matter more than appearances." The apologies were appreciated, but Sarah had never taken a criticism personally. She understood that her unconventional approach would naturally draw skepticism until her performance spoke for itself. The 6,000-meter hit had provided that validation in the most dramatic way possible. Lieutenant Torres, the range safety officer, stopped by Sarah's position with official paperwork documenting her achievement. "Martinez, I need to get your signature on the record of this shoot." The 6,000-meter hit will be officially recorded and forwarded to Marine Corps Marksmanship Headquarters. As Sarah signed the documentation, she realized that her name would now be permanently associated with one of the most exceptional marksmanship achievements in recent Marine Corps history. The pink rifle that had started as a personal memorial had become a symbol of excellence that would inspire other Marines. The drive back to her barracks gave Sarah time to reflect on the day's events and their implications for her future. The successful 6,000-meter shot had exceeded her own expectations and opened possibilities that she hadn't previously considered. Advanced training opportunities, potential assignment to specialized units, and recognition as an elite marksman were all now within reach. That evening, as Sarah cleaned and maintained her rifle, she thought about Emma and how proud her sister would have been of the day's achievements. The pink coloring that had honored Emma's memory had also carried Sarah to heights she never imagined possible when she first enlisted. The rifle's distinctive appearance would no longer draw mockery or skepticism from her fellow Marines. Instead, it had become a symbol of the principle that unconventional approaches could achieve remarkable results when combined with skill, determination, and proper preparation. Sarah's success had proven that traditions were less important than performance. Word of the 6,000-meter shot was already spreading beyond Camp Pendleton through military communication networks. Sarah's achievement was the kind of story that inspired Marines throughout the Corps and demonstrated the potential for exceptional individual performance within military structure. As she completed her rifle maintenance routine, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction and anticipation for future challenges. The 6,000-meter shot had validated her abilities and opened doors to advanced training and specialized assignments. More importantly, it had honored Emma's memory in a way that transformed personal grief into professional achievement. The pink rifle stood in its rack, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Its unconventional appearance now represented proven excellence rather than questionable judgment. Sarah had transformed both herself and her weapon into symbols of the extraordinary achievements possible when natural talent, proper training, and personal motivation combined perfectly. 3 months after the legendary 6,000-meter shot, Sarah Martinez found herself standing before the entrance to the Marine Corps Scout Sniper School at Quantico, Virginia. Her pink rifle case drew curious glances from other arriving students, but the looks were now filled with recognition and respect rather than mockery. Word of her achievement had spread throughout the Marine Corps sniper community, and many of the instructors had specifically requested to work with a Marine who had made history with an unconventional weapon. The acceptance letter to Scout Sniper School had arrived just 2 weeks after her record-setting performance at Camp Pendleton. Lieutenant Colonel Myers had personally recommended Sarah for immediate advanced training, bypassing the typical waiting period that most Marines faced. Her 6,000-meter hit had demonstrated abilities that the Marine Corps couldn't afford to leave undeveloped. Master Gunnery Sergeant James Rodriguez, the school's chief instructor, had read Sarah's file multiple times before her arrival. 23 years of military experience had taught him to recognize exceptional talent when it appeared, but Sarah's documented achievements were beyond anything he had seen from an entry-level student. Her performance metrics suggested natural abilities that typically took years of specialized training to develop. Martinez, welcome to Scout Sniper School. Rodriguez greeted her as she reported for in-processing. Your reputation precedes you, and I'm personally interested to see how you perform in our program. That 6,000-meter shot has become something of a legend around here. Sarah maintained her professional demeanor despite the recognition. Thank you, Master Gunnery Sergeant. I'm honored to be here and ready to learn everything the program has to offer. The other students in Sarah's class represented the elite of Marine Corps marksmen, each having earned their place through exceptional performance in their units. However, even among the select group, Sarah's achievements stood out as remarkable. Her classmates included Marines with multiple combat deployments and years of specialized training, yet none had accomplished anything comparable to her record-setting shot. During the first week of training, Sarah's pink rifle continued to draw attention and questions from both students and instructors. The weapon's distinctive appearance contrasted sharply with the military standard equipment used by everyone else in the program. However, Sarah's consistent performance quickly established that her unconventional choice was based on proven results rather than personal preference. Gunnery Sergeant Michael Chun, one of the primary instructors, had initially been skeptical about allowing a non-standard colored weapon in the program. Military traditions and standardization were important principles in sniper training. However, Sarah's documented achievements and the emotional significance of her rifle's coloring had convinced the leadership to make an exception. "Your rifle performs exceptionally well," Chun observed after watching Sarah complete a complex shooting exercise. "The modifications you've made seem to enhance rather than compromise its capabilities. More importantly, your emotional connection to the weapon appears to improve your focus and consistency." The academic portion of Scout Sniper School challenged Sarah in ways that pure marksmanship training had not. Advanced ballistics, weather reading, camouflage techniques, and tactical planning required intensive study and practical application. Sarah threw herself into these subjects with the same determination that had driven her shooting achievements. Her classmates gradually warmed to Sarah as they witnessed her performance and learned about the personal story behind her pink rifle. The initial skepticism gave way to genuine respect as Sarah consistently scored at the top of their class in both academic and practical exercises. Her 6,000-meter achievement was no longer viewed as a lucky shot, but rather as evidence of exceptional abilities. Private First Class David Kim, one of Sarah's classmates, had initially questioned whether she belonged in the program based solely on her short time in service. "I thought she was just a publicity stunt at first," he admitted to another student. "But watching her shoot and seeing how she handles the academic material, I realize she's probably the best natural sniper any of us will ever meet." The field training exercises at Scout Sniper School pushed all students to their limits, combining marksmanship with tactics, stealth, and survival skills. Sarah's performance in these comprehensive evaluations demonstrated that her abilities extended far beyond simple shooting accuracy. She excelled at reading terrain, estimating ranges, and making complex ballistic calculations under pressure. Master Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez had been observing Sarah's development throughout the program with growing appreciation for her potential. Her combination of natural talent, emotional motivation, and professional dedication reminded him of the exceptional snipers he had worked with during his own combat deployments. "Martinez has the potential to become one of the finest snipers in Marine Corps history," Rodriguez confided to Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Stevens, the school's commanding officer. "Her technical skills are already exceptional, but more importantly, she has the mental discipline and emotional strength that separate good snipers from great ones." The final examination at Scout Sniper School included a comprehensive shooting test that challenged students to engage targets at various distances under different environmental conditions. Sarah's performance was closely watched by instructors who were curious to see whether she could replicate her record-setting achievement under formal evaluation conditions. The test's longest distance requirement was 1,800 meters, challenging but well within Sarah's demonstrated capabilities. However, the instructors had quietly arranged for a special 3,000-meter target to be available if Sarah requested the opportunity to attempt it. They wanted to see whether her extreme long-range abilities were consistent or had been a one-time achievement. Sarah's performance during the formal examination exceeded even the high expectations that her instructors had developed. She scored perfect hits at every required distance and requested permission to attempt the optional 3,000-meter target. Her success at this distance confirmed that her abilities were consistent and reliable rather than dependent on ideal conditions. Following her graduation from Scout Sniper School as the honor graduate of her class, Sarah received orders to report to a specialized reconnaissance unit that had specifically requested her assignment. The unit's commanding officer had heard about her achievements and wanted to incorporate her exceptional long-range capabilities into their operational planning. Captain Robert Mitchell, the reconnaissance unit's commander, met with Sarah during her in-processing interview. "Martinez, your reputation as a marksman is impressive, but I need to understand how you'll function as part of a team. Snipers in this unit work in pairs and must coordinate with larger tactical operations." Sarah had anticipated questions about teamwork and had prepared thoughtful responses based on her experiences at Scout Sniper School. "Sir, I understand that individual achievement means nothing without effective team coordination. My goal is to contribute to mission success, not to set personal records." The assignment to the specialized unit represented the culmination of Sarah's transformation from a grief-stricken young woman seeking direction to an elite Marine sniper with exceptional capabilities. Her pink rifle had become a symbol of the principle that unconventional approaches could achieve remarkable results when properly applied. During her first deployment with the reconnaissance unit, Sarah's abilities proved invaluable in providing overwatch and long-range support for her teammates. Her record-setting 6,000-meter shot had opened doors, but her consistent performance in operational environments established her reputation as a reliable and effective team member. Staff Sergeant Thomas Wright, Sarah's spotter and partner in the reconnaissance unit, had initially been concerned about working with someone whose rifle drew so much attention. However, their successful completion of multiple missions convinced him that Sarah's abilities far outweighed any concerns about her weapon's distinctive appearance. "Working with Martinez has been the highlight of my career," Wright confided to other Marines in the unit. "Her shooting abilities are legendary, but she's also one of the most professional and dedicated Marines I've ever served with." That pink rifle has become a symbol of excellence rather than a distraction. The operational success that Sarah achieved with her reconnaissance unit led to recognition at the highest levels of Marine Corps leadership. Her combination of exceptional marksmanship, professional competence, and inspiring personal story made her an ideal representative for military recruiting and training programs. Lieutenant General Susan Carter, Commanding General of Marine Corps Training and Education Command, personally requested to meet with Sarah during a visit to her unit's base. The general was interested in understanding how Sarah's unique path to excellence could be incorporated into broader training programs. "Sergeant Martinez," General Carter began during their meeting, "your achievements have been remarkable, but I'm more interested in what we can learn from your experience. How do we identify and develop similar potential in other Marines?" Sarah had given considerable thought to this question during her rise through the ranks. "Ma'am, I believe the key factors were having a strong personal motivation, receiving proper technical training, and being given the opportunity to demonstrate capabilities regardless of unconventional approaches." The conversation with General Carter led to Sarah's selection for a special assignment, developing new training methodologies for the Marine Corps Marksmanship Training Unit. Her insights into the psychological and technical aspects of exceptional shooting performance were considered valuable for improving overall Marine Corps shooting standards. As Sarah reflected on her journey from that difficult morning at Camp Pendleton to her current position as one of the Marine Corps' premier snipers, she often thought about Emma and how her sister's memory had guided every step of the process. The pink rifle that had honored Emma's favorite color had become a symbol of achievement that inspired Marines throughout the Corps. The mockery and skepticism that had greeted Sarah's unconventional rifle on that first day seemed like ancient history. The weapon that had once been dismissed as inappropriate for military service had become one of the most famous rifles in Marine Corps history, representing the principle that excellence could emerge from unexpected sources. Sarah's story had been featured in military publications and training materials as an example of how personal motivation could drive extraordinary achievement. The pink rifle was no longer just Sarah's weapon. It had become a symbol that encouraged other Marines to pursue excellence regardless of conventional expectations. During quiet moments in her quarters, Sarah would carefully clean and maintain her distinctive rifle while thinking about the journey that had brought her to this point. The weapon that had started as a memorial to her sister had become a tool for honoring Emma's memory through professional achievement and service to her fellow Marines. The promise Sarah had made at Emma's graveside, to excel at everything she attempted in the military, had been fulfilled beyond her wildest expectations. The pink rifle that had drawn ridicule had silenced an entire range and opened doors to a career that honored both her sister's memory and her own exceptional abilities. As she prepared her equipment for the next day's training mission, Sarah smiled at the thought of how shocked her critics from that first day would be to see where her journey had led. The pink rifle that had been mocked as inappropriate for a Marine had become a legend that would inspire generations of future marksmen to pursue excellence without regard for conventional limitations.